All right, our second topic today. We want to look at we've seen just like recent stories, and we'll have something in the show notes on this, but just Ice Cube, and maybe he's taken a turn in terms of what just his views on the world or the people he associates with and so forth. Particularly pointing out just association with Tucker Carlson or figures like Joe Rogan and so forth, which I don't necessarily think is the same thing, but nonetheless, that point being made. So, Tunde, what are your thoughts on what we've seen lately? From Ice Cube, as far as like his interactions with people who may have been hostile to some of the things, that he's talked about in his music, or just that, that hip hop culture, it kind of ascribes to or values.
Yeah, I think, well, first I want to second what you said, that Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson definitely aren't in the same sphere of,
I don't think
BS. No, I think it's interesting. Ice Cube has, it's kind of this long arc of his life that I think has been very public, because he began as a famous rapper with NWA when he was in his late teens. I think he was 18 or 19 when they had their first album. So we got a chance to watch a man mature, grow up and learn, and
when he started, he was, you could say, very like a more radical, NWA was not a status quo type of, hey, we got to change, we got to change things.
No, I mean, one of the things to your point,
the police and all that.
No, but I was joking with you just before we got on to record, just for the audience, that, I started going back listening to some of these old albums that I grew up with as a teenager. And it's true. I mean, look, NWA was the first group that got national attention for a song called F the Police. Remember?
Yeah.
And they brought to the culture the idea that there was something going on in Black communities as relates to policing and the unfair treatment and the lopsided treatment that Blacks got in their communities by police versus how everyone else was treated outside the Black community, which then the technology 30 years later by the last decade proved that, that was true. So in that sense, yeah, you're right. He was, I'll say the word militant, but kind of for a reason. He grew up in an environment having been exposed to this type of behavior and treatment of the lowest caste in our society, which is Black Americans in the ghetto, and how they were treated by the system. And so, yeah, he had a chip on his shoulder, and he let it be known.
Just real quick, I know I'll let you keep going, but the one thing, because you don't want to take away people like Public Enemy and stuff like that. So they weren't the only ones,
true.
But they were like the most antagonistic. Like they were directly, like in your face, and we're bringing the fight to you more than kind of some of the other groups were just kind of. Were I guess less antagonistic. They were still speaking the truth to power, so to speak, but less so with the flipping the bird and a bunch of like being very symbolic in terms of a real disdain and like we're coming at your throat.
Yeah, there was a certain feeling of real, like the word militancy and rebellion. Like that's F the police, right? This is different.
Yeah.
Like you said, Public Enemy was more political and obviously made their points and their message heard, but yeah, NWA kind of just went in your face.
I mean, the name of the group, it was a complete antagonistic kind of approach to it.
And ends with attitude, and meaning, and the N word with attitude, as the name of the group was in 1988. I think was when the first album came out. It was not something that the world had heard before. So I think he is a great example of this kind of arc that we see in some artists, and I would say maybe not just artists, but people who have been in the limelight for the majority of their life. And throwing it back to you, I mean, you do a great job observing people like Kanye West as another example.
Well, yeah, it's just what it is we see like people who when they come into the limelight, they have a certain kind of mindset, a view, approach. And I don't think it's fair to say people have to stay, wherever they are, that they have to stay there for the rest of their life or anything like that. Like you expect people to grow and evolve, but it is interesting. And so I think this kind of raises the first question this raises is like, okay, like we can't get into people's head. It's like, so you're not going to say, oh, well, does he now share an aligned worldview with Tucker Carlson or something like that? I'm not going to try to go down that road. But let's say he is still pretty similar to where he was before. The question is okay, is it wrong for him to meet with people he may disagree with or who may be hostile to some of the things that you are, hold dear to yourself. Like Tucker Carlson has not been one to condemn violence by the police against Black people. Ice Cube has been one to speak out against that very aggressively, at least, historically. So that kind of issue. So is there a problem if Cube goes on to his, to his platform and brings eyeballs to Tucker Carlson's platform, or is Cube then expanding his own platform in that sense? So I think that's kind of the first thing we wrestle with is, should these silos remain separate if, assuming there are separate silos? And so that's a question. And then obviously there's the question of, or there's the kind of interesting view of the potential changing of the man. And, we did a show, a couple years back, talking about the contract with Black America that Cube was talking about. And, and that's something that still indicates that he's still trying to at least take a mindset of, hey, what can we do better for Black people? Where he's gone with that, though, may or may not be the same place that other people have gone with it. And so I think both of those issues are kind of separate issues. So, I mean, did you, I want to throw it back to you because I did want to get your thoughts on that first issue. Like, as far as should we be raising an eye when somebody goes out of their traditional kind of silo, or is that something we should encourage more?
I don't know, man. It's a very good question because I think, like you said, we can't get inside of people's heads. And that's obviously would be the best thing if we could do that, because then we would know if they're genuine, if they've had a genuine change of heart. Because I mean, look, this is one thing I want to be, this is a good conversation because it's all nuance. People are allowed to change how they feel about things. And as we grow and learn and we're exposed to things, right? Like we talked about, we were fans of his music when we were young. And, I was in high school listening to all this stuff and all that. But at some point, I knew, okay, I'm not going to go live my life like that, right? And as I grew and as I evolved as a human being and a man, I don't behave. I mean, I used to use the N-word in high school and calling my friends the N-word. I haven't used the N-word since I was 22 years old, and that was a conscious choice. So I went that direction in my life. Other people may go other directions. And so I think we should all be allowed to be given some space as human beings to that we mature, we change our ideas, our life experiences influence us and allow us to see things or not see things. So I think, like we said, in this since the start, when someone's been in the public eye for so long, if someone has got famous in their teen years and now they're in their 50s, I mean, we shouldn't expect that they're still acting like a teenager. But I do think you're right. To people, maybe like mindsets like me and you, let's put it that way, because maybe Ice Cube doesn't think like us. I think that's where you and I, it's a bit of a dissonance we have to deal with. Like, hold on. You're the guy that brought the world the knowledge of what was going on in South Central LA with the cops, which then was proven by the Rodney King beating and all the LA riots and stuff like that. And like you said, now you're kind of caucusing, it looks like, with people that don't really respect that conversation. And they don't want to
hold it in, like, not even, it might be worse than that. Like, actually might actively hold it with disdain or
that's what I mean. Like, they don't even want it to be discussed. They don't want it to be all that, right? And that's why I said it reminds me a bit of Kanye West, which, he was the guy in 2008 or whenever, or 2006, whenever the Katrina happened, and he was on that fundraiser thing, and he said George Bush doesn't care about Black people, remember? And it was a big.
And there were a lot of things in his music for Kanye, same thing. Like, there were a lot of things in his music that were specifically trying to relate or uplift, or relate or kind of publish and talk about the struggle that Black people faced and to try to make things. So, I mean, he wasn't a apolitical rapper who then kind of became, slanted to the right. He was a political rapper on one side that then became a political actor on another side.
Yeah, and becomes an anti-Semite and become basically a bigot himself. It's just interesting how, and now, I think he's been a little bit more open. That he I think has some genuine, psychological and emotional disorders. I don't think. I mean, at least that hasn't been public about Ice Cube. He doesn't seem to have.
Well, I don't think it's fair to look for that, and when somebody kind of goes down a different path. I mean, to me, I think that the idea of talking.
I'm just giving him an excuse if he wants to take.
I'm just trying to help.
Just trying to help him. That's all.
I think it's a more dangerous place to be to say that people should only stay in their silos. That's more dangerous than there is risk when you go outside and you bring your audience to different people and so forth. There's a risk that you could be manipulated. There's a risk that you're being used in a sense, in a way that may not be consistent with what you believe. But that risk, I believe, is less than the risk of everybody staying apart and not ever talking to people who they may disagree with. The other factor in that is, and this is one of the reasons why I would draw a sharp line of distinction between like a Carlson and a Rogan, which, like one of the piece we'll cite in the and in the show notes, like I don't know if as sharp of the distinction is made, is that Rogan does not appear to be to the same degree as like a Carlson, a bad faith actor. Like Rogan seems to just kind of float around and be in a lot of different places, headspaces, but he doesn't seem to be overtly against people in a way.
He's not malicious.
Yeah. Like, and Carlson oftentimes comes off as malicious and in bad faith. Like, well, if this argument suits me here, I'll make it, and if it doesn't suit me here, I'll make the opposite argument, because he's more so just advocating for a particular kind of worldview than any kind of fair application of rules or laws on people. So
I think it's the Russian worldview.
It must be.
Sorry.
But so I do think that, like you can look at those a little differently. Like when you go on and you're caucusing or dealing with someone who openly operates in bad faith, that's a heightened risk than someone who you just may not disagree or you may not agree with on certain things. But nonetheless, like I said, I do believe by and large, your rule of thumb should be go places where it may be outside of your comfort or outside of your silo, even if, like if you can have a cordial conversation outside of that, that's helpful overall too, I think, because the real problem would be when people don't talk to each other anymore at all, and everybody just becomes a caricature to other people. And then we start losing the humanity. So the other piece though on this, and you mentioned it in terms of the kind of seeing someone develop from a teenager to their 50s, is the legacy piece. And so, does this affect Ice Cube's legacy? And then I asked that in the context of like, compare like an Ice Cube to like a Tupac, like a Tupac who also was very outspoken, from a Black people standpoint and trying to make sure or try to help Black people get a more, fair shake in the world. But he died young. And so he never got an opportunity for his stances and positions on things like that to really evolve. Not to say that they would. We don't know if they would or if they wouldn't have. He might have still been. I mean, he was a kid of two Black Panthers, so he may not have at all. But his legacy is in our memory only, or it's only in our memory. He didn't get a chance to change that. Whereas Cube has an opportunity as he continues. He lives and himself evolves, changes, whatever it is. He gets a chance to change how people see him and, what people think about him and so forth. So that's, to me, very interesting. So, what are your thoughts on how this kind of direction that Cube may go could affect how people look at him now, but also look back at who he was in the past and the things he did in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely, all this stuff has a chance to affect the way that we as a society view, these characters in our lives, right? The kind of this, whether you call them celebrities or people that we've watched from the outside. And so I think naturally, just because of the way humans deal with things like nostalgia and the way we look at the past generally with a little bit more rose-colored glasses, and we tend not to. Things look a lot simpler when we look at them through our memory, through the rearview mirror. So I think it always, and I hate to say it like this, but it always helps someone's legacy. I think more so, I would say on average, if you just compare different famous people and all that, if they are kind of martyred at a younger age, because there's less of a chance through them living longer that they're going to break the hearts of the people who liked them when they were younger. I
they
think
live on only in nostalgia and memory.
Yeah, in memory. So, and I think there's some very rare examples, or maybe that, someone living a full life. I can think of like Nelson Mandela, that maybe his legacy actually grew even more as he got older. But actually, I can't think. I mean, he's the only one that comes to mind, because other people have gotten killed, like Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy or other.
No, there's people, like that still continue to
come to mind right now. But I'm just saying, in general, if we look at especially people that were influential to a generation of youth, and that would be like the Tupacs and those types. I think we get to, like we just said at the beginning of the show, someone like me gets to remember Tupac the way I remember him from my high school days, because that's when he got killed. And so I can go back to that when I listen to his music in my memory, and I only see him up to 1996.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, had he been alive till today, he might have said some dumb stuff in 2015 or in 2021, or maybe he might have an opinion about the pandemic I'd have disagreed with.
Yeah.
That might have been a little bit of a knock into how I look at him. And a good example to me would be that just say this is to have fun and this is not threatening one. I was a real big fan of Will Smith until he slapped Chris Rock on the stage, and I would say that seriously. Like,
and that's not even like political.
That hurt me.
That just makes you look at him differently. No,
or like Scottie Pippen talking about Michael Jordan. Like when people have done these things, it's like they're lower on the totem pole for me. Like, damn, you did that. But had God forbid Will Smith passed away, some car accident or something in 2010, I might look at him fondly as, man, he was one of the best actors ever in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Now I don't. Yeah, look at him
and as time went on, you continue to look more and more and more fondly.
Yeah.
And
think about it. I don't look at him like that anymore, knowing in my conscious mind that him slapping Chris Rock has nothing to do with his ability to be a great actor.
Yeah.
I just don't like him anymore for that, and that damaged him in my mind. Yeah. And that I think is So
well, there was I know like with The Dark Knight. They invested, or Batman talked about this, and then Jay-Z picked up it as well. Just kind of that whole "it's better to die a hero than to live long enough to become the villain," and so that's what this kind of reminds me of in that kind of sense. And not to valorize or to say it's a good thing to die, but just how as if the book on you is continued to be written, then how people see you can change and can change substantially. And it's not that it erases things that you've done in the past, but it may obscure things you've done in the past. And, we saw a lot of that when people were, like the canceling, so to speak. And, people that were still alive, a lot of times when things would come out about them, it would hit differently than when people who had already passed away, when things came out about them. And this is an apples to apples thing. Obviously, something could come out that would be bad enough that even if you're dead, it would really knock you down some pegs. But it seemed like it was more kid gloves when somebody was dead, and people were like, hey, like person's not there to defend themselves and all this other stuff. So, it's interesting from that standpoint. But again, obviously, I would still say, if it were me, I'd rather live and keep rolling the dice than to lock in with something and be like, all right, well, everybody's going to see me like this from here on out.
Maybe that's why Jeffrey Epstein hung himself.
Oh my goodness! I can't believe you went there. But I mean,
what I was thinking of actually.
It's one of those things, though. But let me say this though, and you kind of, I want to make sure this gets out though. But some of it is unfair, and it's like that because while you say, hey, we got to give people space to grow, and whether we consider it evolving or devolving, but we can't expect someone to stay the same as we remember them their whole life. Some of that is that expectation from fans or from people, in the public is very unfair. And actually that is one of those things like, can you observe something without changing it? We had another, second week in a row now we're referencing quantum physics, but that people have this expectation of you that you can't change. I wonder if that just people that are rebellious at heart, like somebody like Ice Cube, who was you could look at him and say, yeah, that's a guy who was rebellious at heart. The expectations of people to stay the same could affect how that person grows and again, evolves, devolve, whatever you want to say, but changes, but I think people have to have space to be able to do that. I mean, these are human beings and you got to give them space to change. And then if you just start disagreeing with them at that point, then you got to live with that. It's not like they're allowed, they don't have to stay a certain way so that you can be comfortable, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's why I agree with you in the end. I'd rather see Ice Cube going on Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan than not. I mean, like I said, I got no problem.
That's what he wants to do. Yeah. I mean,
I've got no problem with Joe Rogan at all, but I do have a problem with a guy like Tucker Carlson, who, to me is just, like you say, an active, malicious disruptor of kind of narratives. And sometimes I wonder, that's where I would wonder to get in Ice Cube's head. Does he really know all about Tucker Carlson? Has he watched the way he talks about certain things, the way he talked about George Floyd, and then try to make it out like that was a hoax, that the guy was killed by the cop that we all saw for 8 minutes? Or did because Ice Cube's a pretty, well-established guy with a team of agents and, kind of handlers like most celebrities at his level have. Or was it that one of his handlers said, hey, man, this guy's a very well-known media guy in politics, and we think doing his show would be a good idea. And Ice Cube said, yeah, okay, I'll do a show. I mean, that's to me where I said the mindset like mine just kind of would wonder that, because that would affect how I feel about Ice Cube. Because if he just did this show, I'd be like, I'll give him a little pass. Like, all right, he doesn't know all about this guy. If he watches Tucker Carlson's show every night, I would find it more intriguing. Like, how did you get from NWA to this? That's what I'm saying. It would be a little bit more of, that's intriguing. I'd like to learn more about that. How that happens. So.
I think we can wrap this topic from there. We appreciate everyone for joining us on it. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Till next time, I'm James Keys, and we'll talk to you next time.